while she's doing that, my name is Justin Bezold, project manager for Trout Limited. Talk to you today a little bit about a design project, Rattlesnake Creek, tributary to the Natchez River, located about 25 plus miles from Yakima. You'll have the map in a second. It's a design only project. Design only because we don't know the costs. We actually debated doing this one, putting this in as a design build type of project, build fit project, but we actually don't know the implementation costs. Because it does involve irrigation wells, those costs can jump. I'll jump right into it. Just a quick roadmap, some maps, limiting factors, fish use, fit and recovery plans, constraints, budgets. Any questions? So there's Yakima. The red dot is the project site. Long story short, it is a little bit northwest, about 25, 27, depending on how you map the Natchez River that year, miles from here. Rattlesnake Creek, though, I will say, is relatively fixed in the landscape, so it's not going. So why Rattlesnake Creek? Why is Trout Unlimited looking at Rattlesnake Creek? Most of the work that we do in the Yakima Basin is focused on flow restoration. That's our primary funders. Encourage us to go get water for fish. With water being the basis of all fish habitat. Without water, you don't have fish habitat. So Rattlesnake Creek has significant fish habitat, both for ESA listed or ESA threatened bull trout and steelhead, but also for non-listed Chinook and coho salmon, plus rainbow west slope cutthroat. It has low flows from mid-August through October. I want to point out that it actually has some of the best flows probably of any tributary in the Yakima Basin prior to mid-August. It is one of the rare ones that does have decent flow through a good part of the summer, but you know, once the heat of summer hits, really the flows drop off. And due to some landscape changes out there, it gets low, it gets warm, it gets hard for fish even now. Also, we have willing landowners, and quite honestly, when we're working with water rights and we're working with Streamflow, willing landowners is a big part of this. Limited number of diverters on one primary diversion, so it does present an opportunity to work on one of the main diversions there. And then improved flows, this is the key, the improved flow should improve stream processes, which is the name of the game here. From the limiting factors analysis, stream flow or water quantity does not actually show up as a primary limiting factor for Rattlesnake Creek. Rather, what it states for water quantity, I've underlined it in bold there. It doesn't give a target flow, it just says it wants the tag supports a normative flow regime. Trout Unlimited, the way that we looked at is that means we try to go get as many water rights and return them to in-stream flow as we can. That's the best way to get a normative flow regime, is to return it to as natural as you can. So now the project site specifically, on the right side of the map, it's not on the map, but you can kind of faintly make it out there, is the highway going up the side of the Natchez. But you see the Natchez River there on the right, flowing top to bottom on the screen, and then the Rattlesnake Creek flowing left to right on the screen. The yellow parcels are the landowners that are interested in taking part in the project. I apologize already online because I found out, I think the map I uploaded, the prism system does not have the blue ditch on it. The ditch location is approximate, as near as I can get it using LiDAR and aerial photos. What you see there's the point of diversion in the bottom left hand of this map. So the idea is that we would basically go to that point of diversion, do a water right change for these landowners and get them onto surface, do a surface to well conversion. But we have to do the design part first. The design part, and I'll go into a little bit more detail on the costs. It's relatively straightforward. I mean, it's a well once you, I don't want to oversimplify it, but an engineer has told me once you design one irrigation well, you kind of design them all in one area, which is handy. So there's a cost savings to be made as we get into the budget here. Most of the cost actually comes from doing some of the water rights and hydrogeological. Any questions?
Just looking at this, do you know that wells are definitely your answer? Or I know into the past, there's been talk about systems that would pump back, and just looking at the yellow, you know, certainly you could do source swaps with the Natchies and
So this is a good question. Typically, we might approach this from doing an alternatives analysis, kind of looking at what are the range of alternatives we can do here. And that might have included piping the ditch, doing a pump station on the Natchez River and pumping water up, maybe moving the point diversion all the way up to the Natchez River, something like that. Long story short, our experience both the Josem ditch, which is up in Ellensburg, lets us know that if you're gonna go from a common point of diversion, landowners typically, and confirm this here, do not want to go back to a shared point of diversion. They want, you know, if they're gonna do it, they want their own point of diversion on their property. I talked with them about piping the ditch, and this, I know this has been brought up before. My understanding is the ditch is a really low gradient and piping is really not an option. So there's not much to do there. It does lose a lot of water. I don't think I have the numbers for the water rights here, but I have those if you want them. So really what we're looking at here is the alternatives are really where would we put the wells? And it's well, laser clearance. Sorry about that. What's worth noting here is the parcels that are on the right that end in 004, 402, 405, 406, and 407. Those are all one landowner. So this looks much worse than it actually is. I think there's only 5. So when I say 5 landowners, that's also only 5 water rights involved here. So there is, it's not as bad as the number of parcels. So project goals, this is always, I'm gonna level with you folks here. I struggle a little bit with this one whenever it comes to design stuff. The design goal is to complete the preliminary designs for 5 water users from Rattlesnake Creek. It would be for about 1.5 CFS, that's their total water rights, approximately. But the overall goal is to take those designs, implement them, and then make sure that that water stays in stream. There's a couple other steps in there that involve moving the water rights. What I can say is 1.5 CFS is the in-stream flow we're aiming for. Yeah, I'll leave it at that unless y'all have any questions. The water rights, I think what's interesting here is that these are some of the few in the Yakima Basin that I found that actually have conveyance water associated with them. So we kind of get a double bonus if we can do this project. We get both their initial water right, or their, what I would call the consumptive use portion of their water right, is not being diverted from the creek, but then you also get the conveyance water that will be converted from the creek. So both chunks of that water are staying in the creek. Objectives, we want to move pretty quickly here, because we think we can move quickly. Complete the conceptual designs within 12 months. Of contracting, and then an additional 12 months after that, complete the preliminary design. Realistically though, and I have a timeline later, what we want to do is start the procurement process for engineering, cultural resources, and licensed hydrogeologists this summer, so that when contracts are signed, work starts within a couple of weeks of the contracts being signed. So we can move pretty quick here. I'll add to this, there's some other stuff going on in the background in the state. You guys might notice there's a drought. And so we think there's also opportunities to work with these folks on drought and speed up this timeline. So existing conditions, I'm gonna own this one. I do not have any really great pictures for you. I really wish I had pictures from 2015 or 2023. I probably should have taken pictures last summer when the water was really low. I don't. What I do have is a couple pictures from decent water years. So in August, what we see in the limited amount of flow data we have, about 30 CFS is what you get at the start of August. Then by the end of August, it drops off. But what you have is a channel near, as it goes from basically that point of diversion downstream to the mouth of the Natchez. So that's about 1.5 miles. It's a braided channel. I don't think that's any surprise. I think it's been that way for quite a while, probably naturally. But when you remove what little water is going out of for the point of diversion, when you remove that water, you end up with even lower flows than there are naturally and in normal water and passage issues. So what you're seeing here is a view from looking downstream from the bridge on the left, and then looking at the bridge on the right. So basically, the picture on the left is what you can't see in the picture on the right. So a really good water year, and I use this one as a good example here, August of 2022. If you all remember, we had kind of a prolonged runoff and substantial runoff in 2022. And we saw some interesting things in stream flows around the Yakima Basin, where they really stayed higher than we expected into August and even into September. So in an ideal year, and in a year like August 2022, I would want the person to say, like, I don't know if this project provides a ton of benefit. Fortunately, August 2022 is as much or more of an outlier than drought years are now. And in fact, I think, what are we on? 3 or so droughts since 2015, so in the last 10 years, 3+ droughts. So as much as I would like every year to be like 22, they're not, but we do get years like 22 that show what the system can be. This is the head gate. Again, there's a picture on the left, it's from 2018. You can see if you're a landowner, why do you want to take part in this project? 2018, look, there's this head gate, you can get to it. Requires some maintenance on the right after the fires, the Rattlesnake subbasin. There was a little bit of sediment deposition. There's some of the same rocks you can see in the pictures. There's a large flat place rock on the right side of the head gate in both pictures. But there's substantial sedimentation, and we would expect that to happen, or continue the foreseeable future in Rattlesnake as the system recovers from the fire. So ideally, if we can get rid of this point of diversion altogether, get the first 5 landowners off, or get the first 5 landowners that want to do it, and then get the rest of them off also. Then we can do away with this. There's no more in-stream work that's necessary. No more in-stream work is necessary, and the ditch can be either reclaimed or whatever use we landowner can do with it. Specific recovery actions from the Yakima Steelhead Plan, Action 17, increase in-stream flows in lower Rattlesnake Creek. It actually calls out switching water users to shallow groundwater wells. That was part of my reasoning for picking that. Number 18, improve sediment transport. If we can remove a point of diversion, long term, we would improve sediment transport because people wouldn't be in there on the ground anymore. Then at the bottom there, you see the bull trout action plan, Rattlesnake action number 1, address impacts of diversions on bull trout. So there are bull trout in Rattlesnake Creek, juveniles, adults spawning and rearing. And so if we can eliminate the point of diversion on Rattlesnake Creek, we eliminate any associated mortality. Constraints, concerns, landowner willingness to follow through. That's always a concern on a design project. I think this one is, I'm less worried about that. These landowners want to do this. They're pretty gung ho. In Rattlesnake specifically, other water users, one thing we can't account for in the Yakima Basin, what happens when you go through a water right change? Are there going to be challenges to your water right change? Is somebody going to come forward and claim impairment? And it could, in theory, be a long drawn out process. Availability of water for the wells. I don't have a lot of concern about that one. Just because of the location of this system, but we do have to do a look at the groundwater availability. And then implementation of some, but not all the water users. And what I mean by that is basically we're working on 5 water users right now. I'd like to get the rest of them involved, but they're not involved yet. And so in an ideal world, it would be all the water users, but we're not there yet. Budget and timeline. The budget is just over 200,000 here. Worth noting, probably should have given you a breakdown. What I know off the top of my head is each well to design is about $9,000 to $10,000. That's conceptual preliminary design and engineering. It's about $45,000 to $55,000 to do the licensed hydrogeology work. It's just a cost that comes with doing that work. If for some reason we can avoid it, because there's been other work done in that area, we're happy to avoid it, and reduce the budget, but we have to plan for it. That also includes, cultural resources, because we anticipate that's gonna be a challenge there. Key dates, like I said, we would start work, ideally in November, December, as soon as the grant would be signed. Work on pre-grant procurement during the summer. And then conceptual designs complete 25. We would also be doing water right evaluations. So we would have a certified water rights examiner looking at each water right, so we know pretty much what we're getting when we move the water rights to the point A to point B. Then doing the preliminary designs in 26, and then field bit or design build in 27. I should add that we could do implementation in 26 if we find other funding, which we're cautiously optimistic about right now. And that's all. Questions, comments, observers?
I have one comment, just by coincidence, I was writing an article about snowpack and comparing recent years, and 2022, the reason it looks like that is, you know, the normal is a hump that up in the Cascades is peaking and starting to decline right now, which happens every year except in 2022. For whatever reason, it just kept right on climbing all the way through April and through May, and then finally peaked and started to fall off as a complete outlier. It's really interesting to see.
It's, I appreciate that, because we saw, in fact, Cowiche Creek, just presentation before this in 22, we saw lower Cowiche Creek with flows that we've never seen in 22. Which led us to think, oh, there's something else going on.
Yeah,
Turns out,
just a weird
great snowpack.
We've got a question from chat. Trevor, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, Justin. I just, so I guess I've got a question. I'll start by saying, you know, I think this is a great project in terms of some of my history with working with folks out on the Rattlesnake ditch. Moving it in the right direction for sure. I'm curious how you envision doing the water right transfers, and let me say the reason I am asking is because you know, we've noted concerns in the past where you take a surface water diversion system like this that is somewhat inefficient, and it might be somewhat unreliable for certain users at certain times. You give them a well, and suddenly they can use water whenever they need to use it. And you know, I guess the concern there being that we don't want to see a good thing in terms of the ditch project become a bad thing in terms of total water supply available basin wide, because folks are using more water than they historically could have. So I just maybe if you have thoughts on that now, or you know, as part of the site visit or something like that, we could think about that moving forward.
You know, I'll have to give that a little more thought. I don't have too much initially. I do know that their water rights, like I mentioned, they, I think it was 2020 or 2021, actually went back through the state Supreme Court and got awarded conveyance water.
Right.
So they have a chunk of conveyance water. So I feel like their on the ground usage is pretty consistent. Of course, we're gonna do the water right evaluations as part of this project. And given what's been going on with TWSA and some other stuff here recently, we're keenly aware of the concerns with this. So I'll give that some more thought.
Cool. Thanks, Justin.
Justin, the conveyance water, would that still be drawn out of the well by the landowners afterwards, or no?
No, initially the thought is the conveyance water is only attached to, it's not attached to the ditch, but the conveyance water is only necessary if water is going to the ditch. So if it's not going to the ditch, at least Trout Unlimited, we wouldn't support a project where someone says, I need my conveyance water. Also, we would say, no, you give up your conveyance water and you get your original water right. I will say one of the things that we're seeing, with these types of projects is that often landowners, they may want to keep their paper water right and be able to withdraw their paper water right, their instantaneous quantity from a well. But I think they quickly realize that, if they have even a 0.5 CFS water right, which it really isn't a huge water right, that's still 225 gallons of water a minute. That's a big well, and it's a big pump, and it's a big cost for them. And so what we're finding in Ellensburg right now is that basically landowners said, oh, yeah, that does cost a lot. I'll do something smaller. And so they're still able to meet their needs just with smaller systems.
Just one of the current uses for the water rights right now is irrigating after.
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, I don't even know if there's any commercial, what I would call commercial agriculture.
Anybody want to ask questions? Oh, Jen, go for it.
Yeah, I've got a question. Justin, I'm excited to see this coming forward, so thank you. I guess I'm curious if you've had any contact with the other ditch users to see if they would be interested. And, does the conveyance water associated with the 5 users you've got, does that stay with the ditch to serve the remaining users? Or, it would be helpful for me to see like where your participating users are relative to everybody on the ditch. I think that'd be helpful in the, percent of water that currently goes down the ditch that would go to wells.
So I can give
That
you,
type of information would be helpful. Thanks.
and I can give you some quick numbers. The short answer is everyone has their own water right. There's a ditch association, but the Ditch Users Association doesn't own any of the water rights, it just manages the ditch and delivers the water. So, as we understand it, anybody could leave the ditch, and move their water right and do something different with their water right. The other water users, I guess, could claim some type of impairment, but I'm not sure, how far it would go. Off the top of my head, what I'm remembering is there's about 4 CFS total diversion at the point of diversion. And about 2.5 of that is what I would call on-farm use. So there's about 1.5 CFS of conveyance water for all users. Of these users, 1.5 CFS, so these are about 30% of the ditch users here involved in terms of the total amount of water, the 1.5 CFS. So it's about 30% or 1/3. And I don't recall exactly how much conveyance water they have, but I do have the numbers, so I can get it for you.
So if they took their conveyance water, left it in stream, could the remaining ditch users claim impairment because there's no longer enough conveyance water to get their water down the ditch to them? Does that count as
I mean,
impairment? or is-
could.
Uh-huh.
I could claim it. I mean, the short answer is I don't know how it would work. Well, thank you.
I mean, and I guess the technical question is, can you run the ditch once you take the flow out of it and still serve the others?
They
or
each
is there
got
a
awarded,
conflict?
everyone got awarded their own individual on-farm use and conveyance
Right,
water.
but I'm not talking about paper rights, I'm just talking the way the ditch runs now,
Yeah.
people take their water off of it. Does that fundamentally change the ability of the ditch to deliver to remaining users or not?
In the one pending claim before the Water Conservancy Board for a right on that ditch, there were some objections made by the Rattlesnake Ditch Association. They did not claim impairment because that 20% of the water was being taken out of the ditch.
It would probably make it harder to work the ditch.
Yeah, there's like a practical answer and then there's a legal answer, and those aren't always the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think practicality, yes, it would make it more difficult to operate the ditch. In terms of legalities, one cannot force another to continue using water that isn't part of their water right. So I don't think that would be something that would carry much water, pun intended.
But the other part of the practical answer is most ditches in that state you will find then are simply diverting above their right for conveyance water unless someone's specifically policing them.
Right, or you know, it could be a boon to the long-term project here of, you know, if things are harder to operate because there are less users on the ditch, it may incentivize those remaining users to do something different.
Was a bunch of Big Creek litigation about that, when Suncadia bought water rights and moved them off that.
I'll look into that.
How did that end up?
As I recall, Suncadia won and the ditch users just had to suck it up.
Wow.
Don't quote me. It was a long time.
Yeah, the other users on the ditch, they're not interested, or it's practical.
They might be interested. I'm not sure. There's some litigation going on between the users. And so these users want to get out of the ditch. And when there's litigation going on, I kind of don't want to get in the middle of it yet. What I'm hoping really is that we can do these and the other folks will look at it like, oh my gosh. All they have to do is go out there and make sure their lines are hooked up and then turn the pump on and the sprinklers come on. But we have to pay a ditch association to maintain a ditch, and then the water still has to come down the ditch, and then we still have to get into our system to pump it. So what I'm hoping is they basically see this and say, well, I want that too.
But they're not expressing interest now or haven't.
I've not talked to them yet. Of course, you know, a drought this summer and 1 or 2 leases for drought purposes could change that. Realistically.
Is it fair to say that ditch users are not all on speaking terms with each other?
I mean, I think from my limited experience, that might be an accurate assessment.
Bunch of diplomats.
Any other questions? No?
Do you have any other sources of water you see that could become available to help Rattlesnake Creek if you don't latch on to these?
No. Realistically, there's not very many water rights out of Rattlesnake Creek. There's one further upstream, but it's in the canyon. I guess we call it a canyon upstream. It's really small. There's not much else. I guess you could say there's one avenue to help the creek if this doesn't work, is you could build a quasi side channel from Natchez around the base of the hills and dump it into the Rattlesnake.
Rosa.
Yeah.
You likely will see a moderate boost in base flows for 10 to 15 years following the scale of the fire in the watershed.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
And
Thank you, everyone.
unless anyone has any, okay,
Where's the-
thank you much, Justin.